And so it is, dear friends, that the wheel of the year turns from the height of summer solstice with its dreamy cosmic expansiveness past St. John's tide with its call to conscience to meet now at the cross quarter, the halfway point betwixt summer solstice and the autumnal equinox, marking the point on the wheel when we pick up the scythe to reap what we have sown. For now begins the festival season called by folklore Lamas, Loafmas, or Lugnasund, which means assembly of Loaf, a festive gathering hosted by the Celtic solar king Loaf, representing the sun that has gone into the grain. So he calls the people together for the funeral games to commemorate the death of his foster mother, Tadatul, an earth goddess who embodies the dying vegetation that feeds humankind, a role that he will now take on. It's also the wake for the death of summer, the end of the milk and honey season, and the beginning of the harvest toil. The harvest is the sacrifice of Lu. The sun god is cut down to become our bread. From death comes the staff of life. The staff of life baked into bread. And bread is, right, the staple. It's like the cosmic love child from the union between the sun and the earth. For the fashioning of the loaf takes the gift of nature further. It involves the fruits of human labor. Right? Grain is crafted by human hands, combined with the four elements to rise up as bread. And some of the first fruits are ready for harvest, but some too immature to be eaten, too maybe diseased. These have to be culled, removed, fed to the animals or the compost so that they don't drain the life force away from the good fruit. If we left everything on the tree, the vitality would be weakened. Or worse, the bad fruit would weigh the branch down until it breaks, destroying the whole crop or sometimes killing the tree. So the culls are taken so that the good fruit and those who depend on the crop for survival might live. The king is dead, long live the king. Right? I've long pondered this iconic statement, which holds the essence of the sacrifice of the grain harvest. For now begins the season of death in service to life. So even though the sun, it's still very hot, right? It's hot for the ripening. It's been decreasing since St. John's. And I don't know if you're noticing, but the shadows are lengthening, right? The days are getting shorter. We are making our descent toward the dark half of the year. And I've been thinking a lot about one of my favorite Irish folk songs, which says it all. John Barleycorn must die. There's many versions. Maybe you've heard of the one that the band Traffic made popular in the 70s. It has tons of verses graphically describing in anthropomorphically gory detail the process of barley becoming bread and beer. So John Barleycorn is cut down. He's winnowed well, beaten with sticks, as the folk song goes, to separate the wheat from the chaff, right? Crushed beneath the millstone. Right? It's a real crucifixion. And so we see that the tale of John Barleycorn is an allegory of the Passion of the Christos. And just like the Christ, the grain will rise again within us. The harvest season is a time of judgment, of discernment. We are called to sift through the things that have grown up in our lives over the past year. And we have to decide what we'll keep, what we will continue to cultivate, let ripen, and what we will cut away. Right? So we have to make choices and we have to act on them. So at this cross quarter, the cycle of life turns past the peak of growth into the time of release. And in astrology, the moon, 5/5 past the new on the way to full, is called the disseminating moon. So during this phase, what was built up in the waxing cycle begins to be released into the environment. We start to see the results of our work. So at Lammas, the sun is 5/8 on the way around the wheel from the winter solstice. So growth is reaching its peak, and the life of the sun god has begun to bleed off into the fruit and grain. And just as the sun goes into the grain, the cosmic light is ripening each of us, preparing us for the threshing floor. So we can learn from our yield, what we're going to gather in. Right? We have to self-harvest. So even as we're taking in the bounty from the fruits of the earth to nourish our bodies, we become the spiritual fruit that will sustain the world's soul. We can consciously store up the essence of the summer sun within us as soul strength. We digest the cosmic summer expanse now in our memory. Looking with a discerning eye, with appreciation and compassion at our current crop, asking, am I a fit food for the gods? Am I ripening well? Am I feeding? And am I being fed? And really, in essence, this is the time to ponder the mystery of the wheat, right? That which dies and lives again, right? That which is cut down will rise again like the sun. So who will rise again? We will rise again. And yes, like John Barleycorn, we may fall so that we can rise again. Yeah, in the verses, there's this whole part about John Barleycorn and the evils of indulging in too much alcohol, right? This is the other byproduct of the grain harvest. It's the opposite of the staff of life, right? The crutch of alcohol. So yes, there are dark aspects to this festival because it's meant to lead us into the dark half of the year. So I've been thinking a lot about that because, you know, I've noticed that there's a lot of sort of a negative modern connotation to the ancient ritual of burning the wicker man. Right? People equate it with a human sacrifice. Now, if you do your research, you find out this is actually a false rumor started, by the way, by Julius Caesar, because he sought to conquer the Druids and wasn't really able to do that. So that's how these things work, right? But it's interesting that how these ancient rituals depicted through a malicious, materialistic thinking become horror movies, right? A debasement, making a mockery of what was purely an offering of thanksgiving by the people, the people who lived in accordance with the cycle of the season. So this practice of making an offering of gratitude for a bountiful harvest, right, is part of our human heritage. And yes, it's true that every impulse from the past has become degraded if it's not consciously reclaimed and renewed. And that, yes, human sacrifice was a corrupted debauchery of those earlier impulses, a confused materialistic black magic overlay of what the true concept of free will sacrifice is meant to be, exemplified by the Christ event. Does that make sense? So yeah, our community will be making a scarecrow. We're going to make a straw man, a wicker man, if you will, during our Lammas festival at Sticker Farm. We're going to give thanks for the biodynamic grain and, especially the Pfeiffer wheat grown on that sacred land. We're going to sing together. Ultraviolet Archer will bring her song, Circle Skills, and we'll make an offering of the harmonizer preparation. Put this little recipe up here for those who are interested. And this is a gifting to the elementals, right? The spirit of the land. And we will contemplate the parable of the sower and the feeding of the 5,000 as well. So much, so much. But yeah, I envision this building of a human figure filled with straw as a symbol of the sun force that fills the human being with vitality and light. Right? I was thinking about how, in fairy tale, straw is spun into gold, right? Gold is a symbol of the sun. So by co-creating our straw man, we're committing an act of community service that encourages us to set intentions, to offer reverence, to garner optimism, as well as alongside any need to acknowledge, there's a lot of grief and loss in the world right now, right? And this is a way of facing ourselves, a true accounting of what we have sown. I think of the Bible verse that says, they shall know you by your fruits. It's accounting. So the harvest festival of Lammas, it's about stepping up to do not only the outer work in the world, but the inner work needed to manifest and preserve what feeds our body, our mind, our soul, feeds our spirit. So it's an opportunity to look at not only our harvest, what we're preserving, all of that. It's a way of also looking at our regrets. Yeah, because sometimes we have regrets, and we can also say our farewells for things that didn't work out, right? Not everything that we plant is going to grow. It's not, it's not meant to. Not everything we plant is meant to grow. So we can use this time to think of the things that maybe we meant to do this summer or this year that, to be honest, have not come to fruition. I often like to project my regrets, my disappointments onto natural objects like pine cones, or, write things down on dried corn husks if you have them, or, a piece of paper, and throw it into the bonfire, or mix it in with the golden straw in the wicker man. Releasing all unmet expectations to make room for what is there to harvest. Yeah, and sometimes we just have to say, fare thee well, right? When enough is enough, put it in the compost, move on. Yeah, we can ask ourselves, what do I need to let go of? What is over? What is not serving? What needs to pass away from my life? What must die? To say goodbye and thank you. And yeah, like with regrets, you can find a visual symbol to represent what we want to say farewell to. We can throw it in the fire, in the lake. We can bury it in the ground, perhaps in the form of flower bulbs, which will manifest something in a new form come spring. So yeah, everyone is invited at this time of year to put any intention, prayers into the sun-filled straw man, and then we set fire to our convictions, offer up our individual and collective healing wishes. Because it's time to take stock. Take stock of our personal harvest as well, right? Objectively remembering what seeds we've planted, asking, have they borne good fruit? And yes, we can go ahead and find a visual way to represent this. I have this little corn dolly here. It's one of my favorite ones with the broom. You can make a corn dolly. It's fun. We can weave some wheat. This is actually done by a lot of farmers, so that it can become a dwelling place for the harvest spirits, or something that you hang in your house as a representative of the spirit of your home. And another thing that we can think about is, what do we want to preserve, right? This ancient art it's making a revival, right? Canning, like our grandmas did. So as the bounty flows, we can make preserves, either literally or symbolically, and as we turn the summer fruit into jams and jellies and chutneys for the winter, we can think about the seeds that we want to keep, the seeds that we'll plant next year. How can we keep these seed potentials sweet in the root cellar of our memory? It's okay for something to lay fallow for a while, to gestate. And yeah, speaking of sweet, the traditional day for the blessing of the beehives is August 8th, which is also one of the last times for a healthy honey harvest. Can't keep taking from these spiritual messengers of the sun. We have to leave some honey for the bees so that they have the reserves that they need to survive the coming winter. So yeah, of course, there are lots of divine archetypes that we can tune into for this festival, right? We already mentioned the Celtic solar king Lugh, he of the long arm, right? This is referring to the long rays of the sun at Lugnasad. And we gain inspiration from the pre-Christian Greek goddess of grain, Demeter, or her Roman version, Ceres, right? Her name means cereal. So before the sun god merged with the earth through the Christ deed, it was her job to feed the world. And after her reunion with her daughter Persephone, who represents the journey of initiation, Demeter gave the gift of agriculture to humankind so that we could cultivate nature for ourselves. And the Norse and Celts give us this image of Freya on the boar, right? Have you seen this? It's great. It's this totem of prosperity, vitality, ceremonial feasting, right? The boar is a great forager. So this symbol represents the boar represents, the time before agriculture, when food was foraged. And the goddess Freya riding the boar is a symbol of the cultivated grain, overcoming those old ways of hunting and gathering. Of course, we can combine that. And I think of the god Adonis because he was born from a tree that was gorged open by a boar. And as fate would have it, he was later killed by a boar. So Adonis is another example of a dying vegetation god, sacrifice, so that all may live. And Danu, she's the Irish goddess of fertility and plenty. But I think of her as the mother of the fairies. She's the force that turns the flower to the sun. And yes, we can also remember the healing arts of the Druid priests harvesting the mistletoe. And we heard about John Barleycorn as the embodiment of the passion of the Christos and the death and rebirth in the cycles of nature. And we can tune into the various Native American traditions celebrating what is known as the green corn ceremony at this cross-quarter time, associated with the beginning of the yearly corn harvest. And it's also referred to as the Great Peace Ceremony. Food is a great peacemaker, right? It is a celebration of Thanksgiving, honoring what they call, quote, the great breath maker in the sun. I love it. This is actually a New Year festival for them. It's like the beginning of their new year. And they do stomp dances, among other practices, around a ceremonial fire for 7 days. And one of my favorite images to work with at this time of year is the tarot card of the Empress. She who sets all things in order, representing the mother principle, reproduction and growth, also symbolic of Venus, manifesting beauty in the material world. She rules the senses, teaching us to appreciate beauty in all its forms. The Empress is a figure of creative imagination and the art of visualization. She's so fertile and nurturing, and she provides the means that attracts our desires. So confer with the Empress within to increase creativity, to manifest prosperity, and magnetize love. Now, she is the wise queen. And she makes her decisions based on her intuition and the facts at hand. She can be forceful and strong-willed in her position of authority. I have always this picture of the modern day Empress as, this successful businesswoman, right? She's level-headed and practical, as well as kind and charitable. She's one who instills confidence and nurtures others. She doesn't have to have power over, right? She's a role model. And the throne that she sits on, right? This throne is built of endurance, tenacity, loyalty, and sheer determination. So some images here to work with these things. Yeah, so dear friends, gather the seeds you want to save and feed the coals to the gulls, right? Bake a loaf of bread and make a point of honoring the source of the flour as you work with it. And by the way, Zinniker Farm has harvested biodynamic Pfeiffer wheat that will be processed into flour for sale for the first time this year. In the past, the Zinnikers only grew it from themselves and their animals, but now they want to see if there's an interest in this amazing grain. Right? The history of it is so interesting. And Fried Pfeiffer, he worked with Rudolf Steiner, right? And he was experimenting with this ancient variety of feral spelt that was found in Italy. It was derived from a team of seed breeders in the biodynamic farming movement, back in the day, in Holland, in Switzerland, in Germany, where, by the way, Mark Zinniker's grandfather worked. I love this. They were experimenting with these indications from Rudolf Steiner's agricultural course. Anyway, it's fascinating and very exciting. If you know, you know. And if you want to know, you can learn. So if you're interested, you can contact the Family Farm Initiatives. Supplies are very limited, so you got to put your order in. And yes, just go ahead and bake that bread. And if you have a garden, add something you've harvested to the recipe. Maybe some herbs or some veggies. And my husband's the bread baker in the family. But so if you're not up to making wheat bread, it's a process. Make cornbread, so much easier. Or gingerbread people. Or popcorn, right? The important thing is our good intention. To manifest and harvest the sacred, we need an awareness of our motives. We can set goodwill behind our actions. Then our harvest will be rich and abundant, able to nourish all worlds. So yeah, this is what is living in me today as I stand with you at this cross quarter. So thank you, dear friends. Yeah. I'm here in the heartland, bringing in the sheaves, saying grace with you, sending blessings of love in the wisdom of freedom, with a prayer for peace and goodwill for all. Until soon, blessings.